Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
You know what time it is, so sit back and get ready for the Stafford Voice, your dose of conservative in a world of liberal.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, how you doing? I'm your host, Daniel Stafford, and you are listening to the Stafford Voice, where we are conservative in a world of liberal. And tonight, we're going to talk about the financial crisis that's going on over in Germany. There are many ways to listen, so wherever you're at, just set the channel as a favorite, whatever you have to do so you don't get left behind. Because if for some strange, crazy reason you do miss the show, sit tight. You'll be able to catch the replay. There's no need to panic. Yes, I've got you. In the case you aren't already following on social media, you can find me over on the Twitters at Stafford Voice, or on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, wherever you are. All you got to do is just search for the Stafford Voice, and we'll be there. Also, you can catch up with things over at the YouTubes. We are hopefully, let me flip over. Yes, that's right. Over on the YouTubes, the Stafford Voice channel, we are streaming video. That's right. I'm super excited. You guys can watch what's going on. I don't know if you really want to put yourself through that type of misery, but that's what we're doing. Okay. As I said, we're going to talk about the financial crisis, and I've got a guest tonight that really, honestly needs absolutely no introduction. No introduction whatsoever. The guy is larger than life. Absolutely love him like a brother. I mean, when we finally were able to meet here in Kansas City and sit down and talk about a few things, it's like we were long-lost friends that took a while to finally get back together. The guy is like a brother from another mother. The one, the only, Jason DeWilkins. Jason, how are you, brother?
What's going on, Daniel? My mister from another sister. What's up, buddy?
Oh, man. I'm super excited that we're talking about this. To be quite honest, I really have no idea what's going on. I looked into some things.
Daniel, that's not like you. You know it. You have the finger on the pulse of America. You know everything. Come on.
I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I do have, listen, I've got 2 pages of notes. That's 1 page, and, this is ridiculous. I do have some notes. I looked into some things, yes, because I hate being unprepared. It's just not me. You guys, those of you who are longtime listeners know that I hate being unprepared. So, without further ado, our topic tonight is the financial crisis that's brewing in Germany, and the way you made it sound when we talked about this last week was that this has been going on for a while, and it's just now starting to come to fruition of how bad this really is. I don't know where you want to start, but let's just start by saying some of the things that are kind of influencing what's happening. We could start with Brexit. We could start with that Germany is telling their people to stockpile food and water in case of an attack or catastrophe. We could go on about George Soros. But I think at the center of all of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the Deutsche Bank.
Well, it is, but here's the thing. I think the reason why a lot of people don't talk about this kind of stuff as a whole is I think there's one of 2 reasons. Either A, they assume that most of the people listening are stupid and won't understand it, which I know the audience listening to the show isn't that, of course. I mean, you guys get it. We get it. We're not dumb. Don't talk to us like we're stupid. Tell us what's going on and we'll know what's going on. Or B, they themselves don't understand what the hell's going on. So how do you convey that message to a person who, how do I tell somebody what's going on financially in Europe and from an economic situation, or even around the globe, if I don't even understand it myself? And I think a lot of times your mainstream media really falls victim of that. So instead, we'll talk about Ryan Lochte for the 28th time today, instead of talking about what's really happening around the world, and more importantly, how that's going to impact us here in the United States, because we're fooling ourselves that we don't think it will.
And I think that's the biggest thing is, things that happen today are on such a huge scale that what happens in Germany or Russia or even North and South Korea, those things have a huge impact as to what happens here in the States.
Sure, it does.
And I mean, it even affects financial policy that's coming out of Washington. And we could talk about Trump or Hillary Clinton, but that's not what we want to do tonight. Because I think that as we really dive into this topic, we're going to realize that each and every person sitting at home right now, on their couch, at their kitchen table, wherever they're at, driving down the highway, they're going to come to a realization that what's happening in Germany has a huge impact on what's going to happen to the future here in America.
Absolutely. And when you look at, I think you got to take it back a little bit, Daniel, if you don't mind me doing that. Because like when I had my show, I talked about what happened in Cyprus and what happened in Greece. And when it happened and I did my show, I said, look out, because Greece's situation is very, very similar to ours, except, I guess the wick of their candle burned out a heck of a lot faster than ours did. And plus, they don't have the ability to continue the shell game like we do. So, but I mean, make no mistake about it, their situation is our situation. It just happened to them sooner. And I think it's important to know the role that Germany plays in Europe as a whole, because when you think back, they're essentially the sugar daddy. I mean, they are the country that most in the Eurozone go, okay, well, Germany's always there to help us out when we need it. And so if you remember the issues that happened in Cyprus and in Greece involving, Germany was heavily involved, and Angela Merkel was heavily involved in that situation of the quote unquote Greece bailout, if you will, because that's really what it was, and what the euro did to kind of keep Greece along. But you're going to have to do some things, Greece, to pay us back, which is never going to happen. We know that. And I mean, you look at I just think it's a microcosm. Again, I think it's important to know what Germany's role is in the Eurozone, which is they are the sugar daddy. They are considered to be the ones that are the most solid financially. Now, we know that Spain and Portugal have been, and I'm surprised they haven't hit the wall yet, but they're on the verge of collapse. You look at France recently, and by the way, this just happened 2 months ago. In France right now, they have record unemployment, like the highest unemployment they've had in 50 years. And the reason why the unemployment's so out of control is because you essentially, and this is Bernie Sanders' dream, the reason why they're in trouble is because job owners, the owners of the companies have no rights. The workers do. The employees essentially run the show. And so the labor unions have made it so whether you own the company or not, you have paid time off, you have maternity leave, you can't work more than 35 hours. You are essentially guaranteed a job, because guess what? In France, if you own a business and business is down, you're down 20% year over year, you're having to cut back, you have to scale back your operations, your manufacturing, or whatever it is that your business is, you're not allowed to let people go due to business being down. It's part of the labor union, essentially, Bill of Rights that the workers have in the country of France. So you can imagine why unemployment's so incredibly high. You know what I mean? So their economy, their debt to GDP ratio is out of control. And when the French government themselves wants to institute loosening, essentially taking a more capitalism-like approach towards businesses to allow owners to let people go in the event they can no longer afford to pay people due to their business reducing, or the amount of production needs to be reduced due to just the amount of money they make, and or having them work, God forbid, more than 35 hours a week. You have riots that are happening in France as of June over labor unions just raising hell because no, that's not acceptable. We're not going to work more than 35 hours a week. Well, doesn't that sound similar to the kind of things that you're already seeing happen here with right to work and making our way to 10 and $15 minimum working wage and et cetera, where people are having more of an influence of this is what you're going to pay me and you're going to give me this job because it's a right for me to work. That's happening in France. And so, the reason why I'm saying this is because it all leads up to where Germany's going. You look at Italy, for example. Sorry to keep bloviating, but Italy just recently, and this just happened a couple of weeks ago, there's a big concern from Italy and from the Italian banks because of Brexit. They're freaking out because they don't think they have the money to actually withstand any sort of recession or any sort of downturn. So what the euro has come in and done, because here's what started happening, and tell me if this sounds familiar. What started happening in Italy is people were saying, I think I'm going to pull my money out of the bank because I don't think this is healthy right now. And so the euro comes to the rescue and says, hold on, guys, just so you know, we're going to make sure that if don't pull your money out because we're going to put 150 billion euros and we're going to prop up Italian banks. So there's no need to pull your money out right away because, yes, maybe you're concerned about them not being healthy, but don't worry about it because we're going to back it. So it's fine. Don't worry. Which to me is laughable because if you think of really what that means, that's like saying, don't pull your money out because even though the money you want to take from the bank that doesn't actually have your money in the first place, don't worry about it because we're going to give them phony baloney money ourselves. But we know where that phony baloney money is coming from. I mean, the euro and governments across Europe, I mean, governments don't create wealth. They take wealth. That's what they do. So, I mean, where are they getting this money from in the first place? Well, either A, they're getting it from tax revenue, which we know they grossly outspend whatever tax revenue they have, or it's helicopter money. It's monopoly money. It's just money we print and just hand out because that's what we're going to do to kick the can down the road. And those are just countries that have nothing to do with Germany yet. But I wanted to share with the listeners and you guys especially, like, that's just what's going on in Europe and Italy and France. This is within the last 45 days, Daniel. Just that alone.
That's hard to wrap your head around, to be quite honest. I mean, it's the fact that, and one of the things, when I was looking into this, one of the things that stuck out to me was how the Deutsche Bank is basically paying people to borrow money. They're saying, look, you need money and we need to give you money because we've got to make money. But in order for us to let you borrow money, you have to let us give you a little bit of an incentive and say, here's some extra money. Because how does a bank even sustain that?
They can't.
No, they can't.
Because it's common, like in Japan right now, of having in Europe and in many countries, in fact, Germany's one of them, that have negative interest rates. They're paying you to, like you were saying, they're paying you to take money from them. How is that sustainable? It's simply not. It's laughable.
It's not. And this is, correct me if I'm wrong, the Deutsche Bank is the largest bank in the European Union, correct?
Oh yeah, by a mile. And that's where this ties in, because they're considered to be, all right, well, at least I know we're Italy, I know we're France, we're totally screwed, but Germany, you got your stuff together, right? I mean, you're totally going to help us out. When everything hits the fan, Germany, you got our back, right? I mean, you guys are totally set. And Germany's going, well, at least the bank is going, well, no, not really. So the idea is to nationalize it, to just have the German government take the bank over just for a little bit. Not permanently, but just for a little bit to make things better.
Yeah, we know how good that's going to work over.
Well, exactly. And that's the key is like, you can say what you want about like, let's just bring it back to the United States. Say what you want about greedy, awful, terrible bankers. But who do you have more faith in, Daniel, running Bank of America? The people who actually run Bank of America and know banking for a living, or the United States government? Which one?
The guys that know banking.
Exactly.
That's a no-brainer.
Exactly.
But this came out earlier this morning. This was I can't even remember the figure. I think it was $10 billion. This was a $10 billion issue that was traced back to Russia, and they were doing all of this business through the Deutsche Bank. And it went on for years. But set that aside, you have to remember that, let's go back to the sustainability of the bank for just a second. And this touches on when the other countries typically would go back to the bank and say, look, we need money, you need to float us, can you help us? And Germany, all those other times, would have come in and said, sure. And now they're starting to question things because their customers are losing faith in what's happening to the bank. For instance, second quarter net income fell drastically. Where was it? Oh, I can't remember where it was. Anyway, you've got the bank's CEO, and I'm going to quote him when he says this. His name's John Crean, however. He says that, quote, if the current weak economic environment persists, we will need to be yet more ambitious in the timing and intensity of our restructuring. So that, to me, says, what the hell does this guy know that nobody else knows? If the bank's CEO has no faith in the direction that the company is going right now, there's something to be done.
Well, no, but here's the thought, and this is what I think that those who head Deutsche Bank and what many financial analysts, Austrian economists, and even those who just really follow European markets as a whole will say is that, look, what's going to happen here with Deutsche Bank is Deutsche Bank's going to have to be treated like Bank of America or Chase or any of the big American banks, which is they're just simply too big to fail. We can't let them fail because holy crap, if Deutsche Bank fails, there's nothing we can do. I mean, it's the whole thing goes away. So what we're going to have to do, and this was proposed by Martin Hellwig of Deutsche Bank, who's basically saying that what Germany's going to have to do is nationalize the bank because, again, stress tests have shown that if there's a serious downturn, and we're not talking, a recession that, is, the 2008 like recession, even though that would be pretty close to it. But something that's even slightly worse than what the 2008 market and housing bubble recession essentially ended up being. If that were to happen, Deutsche Bank doesn't have it. They just simply don't have the money. Their assets are toxic. They have their assets equal what their outstanding debt is to the Eurozone. Think of how insane this is. The outstanding debt owed to Deutsche Bank, if you took the entire GDP of the globe this year, it would pay it off. That's how extended Deutsche Bank is. And again, they're considered to be the sugar daddy. So think of it from this standpoint. Basically, what's being proposed is that these guys are too big to fail. So the German government's going to have to step in. And so when the German government steps in, here's what they're going to do. They're going to nationalize the bank. They're going to take the bank over because, again, Germany knows best, not Deutsche Bank. Germany knows how to run the bank better. And so they're going to take it over for a little bit. But don't worry. Because once, the clouds clear, the smoke clears and things are better, Deutsche Bank is going to be back to private sector organization, private company. The government will have nothing to do with it. And then what's nice is that Germany's just going to invest money into the bank, But when things get better, Germany's going to make their money back. Don't worry about it. Germany's going to make money back on the investment they put into Deutsche Bank when times got rough. Well, as we've seen here in the United States, as we've seen all over the world, those investments, those return on investments never, ever happen. And even if they did, where's the money coming from? Because again, where does the German government get their money? They don't get it from either A, taking it from people, or B, printing it. That's it. That's the only solution to the problem. And when you're seeing what inflation has done, and I predict that's what's going to happen around the globe, is you're going to see markets collapse. But I think before you see any of that, you're just going to see hyperinflation that's out of control. And that's going to start in countries like Germany and has already started in other countries in Europe, because the only solution is just print more money and throw it at the problem. Doesn't that ring a bell? Doesn't that sound similar to what you're seeing here in the United States? Only it's happening at a faster rate in Europe because of the entitlement state and the socialist-like state that Europe is in. In many of the countries, it is escalated and it is, accelerated faster. The gig is up essentially in Europe. Here, we still got a couple more years to kick the can, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen bad.
Well, and I couldn't agree more. Because, and this was from an article I think you sent me earlier in the week from Zero Hedge, that there was a stunning admission where they were saying, they were questioning the idea of a global reset. And yeah, I think that's initially what you're getting at is in order for this financial economic crisis that right now is just a bubble sitting over Germany waiting to explode, that it's going to have a domino effect. When Germany goes, then you're going to have other major countries follow suit. And the only way to fix that is going to be a global reset. I'm interested to know what your thought is on that.
Well, like I said, I think the problem is if people running governments around the world actually had a shred of decency and were actually doing the job that their constituents and people who elected them wanted them to do, they would, I guess, look at the banking situation as really nothing more than Social Security here in the United States. If we want to try to make it more simple, let's just look at it from that standpoint. Because you and I and anybody with third grade math knows that the math hasn't worked on Social Security for 70 years? It hasn't equaled out. It doesn't make sense. Now, here's the problem. Not one politician has the courage or the guts to be able to tell the American people, hey, this particular generation or this particular segment, hey, if you're over 35, I just got news for you. I hate to break it to you. You're screwed. You're not going to get anything. Don't count on it. Figure it out on your own. Anybody past 35, we'll hook you up because we've made that promise. Any earlier than that, and from now on, no one's getting anything. But that doesn't get you reelected. That doesn't get you, well talked about in the media. That considers you to be somebody who is a scaremonger and somebody who is not willing to take care of the people. And so what do people do? Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter. You just kick the can down the road and hope that eventually we'll figure out a way to cover our debts. So take Social Security, which we all know is a shell game and the math doesn't work, but everyone kind of gets that. Take that same idea and make it essentially all over Europe. That's really what it is. And for the most part, it is what here in the United States. We're just moving money from this spot to cover this up. And a great example of that is the stock markets. If anyone's paying attention, if anyone is actually grounded in reality, just Europe alone should make the market here in the United States go, whoa, what's going on? And instead, what are we hearing? The Dow's up another record level returns. Yeah. And you're going, what world are you people living in? Which is why I just always say, based on what level of confidence should you or could you have in the market? Based on what? What are you talking about? There can't be any level of confidence you would have in the market, because if you really know what's going on in the market, you'd get your money out of there in 5 seconds, because eventually it's going to all fall. And maybe I'm tinfoil hat Alex Jones guy, but I'm just telling you that's what it is. And if you're paying attention to it, you see it. But no one has the decency to tell the American people what's going on with it, because either A, they think you're too dumb, or B, they don't get it themselves. It's that simple.
Well, and that brings me to a conversation I had with a guy that owns a business. He's actually he owns a couple of businesses. We were talking one day, and he said this was his basic strategy, and it's by far one of the biggest strategies that they do in business, and that is when trends start going in one direction, turn and go the opposite. If everybody out there is buying, it's time to sell.
Yep.
If everybody is selling, now's the time to buy. I think that's what we're seeing with what's happening in the stock market, but I think to a major point that you're hitting on is people are being blindsided by this. I mean, to be truthfully honest, again, this stuff, it's really over my head, and I don't quite grasp the major concept. And maybe it's just because I'm a visual person that if I could draw it all out on the dry erase board, I would get it. But I think that, and I don't know if we'll have enough time to get to it tonight. We may have to invite you back next week to really talk about how this impacts things here in the States, and especially breaking it all down to how it impacts those that are watching or those that are listening, because that's what all of this is about. I really want to break this down and explain it so we know how this stuff impacts us so we can be prepared, because the last thing we need is a global financial crisis that eventually is going to probably be put on us as the United States. But to another point that you brought up, that nobody out there is talking about it, that either they're scared, or B, they think that we're all stupid. There actually is a guy out there that I think isn't afraid to talk about it, but he's too stuck on the fact that two show hosts in the morning are having an affair, and that would be Donald Trump. Donald Trump, I don't think, is afraid to bring something like this up. I honestly don't. But I think that would bring so much global instability that I think he's willing to shut his mouth for a second on an issue like this to see how things play out.
Well, and I don't disagree with that, but Donald has shown that his solution to, let's be honest, the one thing that he really seems to be engaged in regards to his entire presidential run is trade. Okay. We're going to do a better job with trade. That is his big thing. Now, his idea in trade is arguably one of the most destructive things that could ever happen to this country if actually implemented, but that's here nor there. But I think that his tendencies of progressivism and his tendencies to not really truly embrace what actual capitalism is, because the solution to this type of situation is two things. One, you have to just let it fall. And that's going to suck for a long time for a lot of people. And B, you have to let essentially capitalism or the free market decide who the winners and losers are. And no one's doing that across the world. So it's not just the United States. No one's allowing that to happen. They're just simply printing more money and kicking the can. And so instead of letting, countries fail, instead of letting, it's just easier to just simply print more money and we'll figure it out somehow. And it's just robbing Peter to pay Paul, to pay Bill, to pay Tom, to pay Tony, to pay Bob. That's what it is. You're just moving. I'm borrowing money from this guy to pay this guy because this guy owes me money, but then he needs to borrow money from this guy to pay this guy. It's just, you're never going to see your money back. And so all of these countries who are incredibly extended and all these banks who are incredibly extended. And what's so funny about it is the governments then come to the rescue of the banks when most of the time the banks are as screwed as they are because of the policies of the government asking them to do what they're doing in the first place. So it's like, it's like government created the problem. The bank made their problem. And now the government who created it's going to solve the problem they created. And that's what's happening around the world. And if you listen to a Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton, and let's be honest, even a Donald Trump like approach of what the government's role is, I don't see how it changes anytime soon.
I don't either. But it's a case in point that you keep referring to is they keep printing money. Countries keep printing money. Here's a big question. What backs it?
Well, nothing. That's the
exactly. And I think that's something that we need to talk about is what actually backs all of this money that people are printing and where is it coming from?
Well, I mean, keep in mind that since the dawn of time, and actually I have a really, really old episode of According to Me that I did just about this because I wanted to explain money to people, essentially, for those who don't know it. Because here's what's important. Even those who are listening to the program are like, yeah, Jason, I get all this. I understand it. It's always good to hear the perspective from other people because it may allow you to have the conversation with people in your neck of the woods, in your neighborhood, at your dinner table. When you're talking to friends and family members about what's going on, is there an example Daniel will say or I will say or anybody will say that make you go, oh, that's a great way to explain what's going on in Germany to somebody? That's really what the key is. And when you're talking about money as a whole, I mean, keep in mind that up until 1971, all, at least dollars, were backed by gold. I mean, that's really what it was, is that it was an exchange of money or paper in exchange for currency or gold that is being held either at the Fed or in Fort Knox, or there is gold that is backing this money. What we're using now and what almost every country in the world is using now is monopoly money. And it's money that is simply paper. And we think it's worth $5 because it's always been worth $5. But we don't know why it's worth $5. In case in point, let me give you an example really quick of like what inflation will do. And you may have heard stories of like the Weimar Republic in Germany, who the idea when they had a financial collapse was just print money, print money. It was common for you to go into a diner and order a cup of coffee, but before you ordered it, you would ask the server, how much is a cup of coffee right now? And let's just make believe it was 50 cents. Well, I want to pay for that now. Give me my coffee. I'm paying for it now. And the reason why you did that is because it was a very good possibility that by the time you left the diner, the price was different. Like right. That's how volatile inflation was. And then you look at what's going on there, you're looking at what's going on in Venezuela. To answer your question, Daniel, of what backs this, the answer is nothing. And eventually, when it all comes to give you an idea, a 100 bolivar bill, which is what Venezuela uses their dollars, it's bolivars, is now worth what 10 cents used to be worth just years ago. So there was a United States reporter actually who just wrote about this in an article where he's like, he went to a currency exchange in Venezuela, gave him a $50 bill. They gave him 1 pound stacks of hundreds. He had to take a duffel bag with him to pay for a cab ride. That is how worthless their money is now. It is common in Venezuela to go to the grocery store. You don't buy a bag of coffee. You buy scoops of it. And the reason why you buy scoops of it is either A, that's all you can afford, or B, you don't want to buy a bag because that may either be a really good deal right now or a really bad deal based on how volatile the money is. You know what I mean? So I don't want to spend 1,000 bolivar on a bag of coffee when tomorrow it may only cost me 500, but then tomorrow may also cost me 2,000. I don't really know. So I'm better off just buying it a couple scoops at a time, and I'll just shop every day as needed with the money I have and based on what stuff costs. That's how insane it is right now. Right. Now take that and take in how entitled we are as a country, for God's sake, and make that happen in America. And what do you think happens?
I don't know. I think this is it's just too big of a topic for us to be able to tackle in one night.
Probably.
To be truthfully honest, and after the show and from between now and whenever we can get you back on to talk about this, I think I'm going to have to sit down and really dive into this and just shut everything out. But case in point, and this is what I'm really interested in finding out is how this really impacts, things for people at home. I mean,
sure.
Even going back, and this, I'm touching on a topic that Army John on Twitter. He's on Twitter. He's known as Army John, but in the chat, he's known as John. He said post World War I, 1933 Germany, where workers were paid in the morning, prices changed by the afternoon for groceries. It goes back to exactly what you were saying, that something has to be done about this. And whether it's a global reset or just countries just have to absolutely fail. And that be the final
that's really
straw.
what it comes down to. And the reason why I'm so plugged into this stuff, Daniel, is because and I'm no different than you. I mean, I'm a guy with 4 kids and a wife. I'm a middle class guy. I have a day job. I mean, I'm nothing special. I'm not I'm not an economist. I'm nothing more than somebody who looks at stuff that's going on around the world and goes, guys, that's going to happen here. And I pay more attention to that stuff and dork out on websites like Zero Hedge, which, by the way, if you haven't read, I know you have, but for the listeners who are listening, it's a great resource for that kind of stuff. That's the stuff I'll dork out on more so than watching the Olympics, because I don't care. And I don't care that Michael Phelps won 23 medals. Good for him. And I don't care that Ryan Lochte got robbed in Rio in a third world crap hole of a country anyway. I don't care. Like, that's not the stuff that matters to me and my family, but yet that's what mainstream media will talk about. Turn on the news right now, guarantee they're still talking about that stuff. Instead of all the things that we've talked about tonight, who's talked about that? Nobody.
Right. And I think that, what you said was of great importance, and that is, it goes a little further back into what you were saying. These socialists have put things into play, and it's been in play over there for how long now? And it continues, that socialist mentality continues to grow here in the United States, that what we're seeing happen over there is definitely going to play out over here. It may not happen today. It may not happen tomorrow. It could be weeks, months, years down the road. But what we're seeing happen over there will happen here. You go all the way back to when Rome was out conquering vast amounts of land. And this is what they were doing. They were out conquering. They were out making currency. They were out overextending themselves in more than one way. They couldn't get enough taxes paid in from the people that they were out conquering. They couldn't get enough money brought in to cover what they were spending. And what happened? They're gone. I think, Jason, we're definitely going to have you back on to discuss how this stuff is going to ultimately affect us here in the States.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I don't know when we'll be able to do that, whether it's next week or in another week or two, but I would be honored if you'd come back on and talk about this more.
Absolutely, because what I want to be able to do is really bring it to street level and give people an idea. Okay, so now that we know this, so now that we've known what's going on, what does that mean for me here in America? What does that mean for my wife and my kids and my job and all of those things? Let's bring it down to street level so people understand exactly what the impact of that is. I would absolutely love to do that, because I think that's, again, these are the kind of news stories that you need to pay attention to way more so than the other stuff. And I'm glad that you had me on to, just really kind of be able to discuss this further with people to really get them to understand what's going on that no one's talking about around the world. Because again, like I said, I keep beating this, but it's either A, they think you're dumb, or B, they don't know themselves. And neither of those are a good excuse. A, educate yourself on what's going on. I'm no smarter than anybody. In fact, I'm probably the dumbest person who's been on your show ever. But I would also say that I'm nothing special as just somebody who just reads stuff and pays attention to what's going on. And anybody else can do that as long as they understand what's at stake. And I hope people do. And I'll try to do my best to bring that down to street level next time we get a chance to chat.
All right. Awesome. Super stoked to be able to have you back on. You are not the dumbest person to be on the show. That, quite frankly, that's the host, me.
Second dumbest. That's fine.
So that's okay. We're in our safe place, so it's okay. You can say whatever you want. I'm not going to get offended. But I think that's all the time we've got tonight with you, Jason.
No, thanks for having me. And I'm going to stick around because I got a history lesson coming up, okay?
Heck yeah, you do.
That's what I tune into TSV for. So let's do that.
Awesome. Okay, we'll chat with you later on, Jason.
All right, buddy. We'll see you.
All right, have a good one. Wow. Okay. That's all I can say. That was intense. I was taking notes on over here on the side. We're definitely going to have to talk about that a little more. But you know what? We've got to save some time for the stuff that happens in history. So, without further ado, let's dive into that, shall we? He said about King George, quote, "I despise, I hate, and wish to destroy him and such tyrants." And all such tyrants, unquote. Samuel Chase was born April 17th, 1741, in Princess Anne, Maryland. His mother died giving birth to him, and he was the only son of his father, Episcopal clergyman Thomas Chase. No stranger to being a quick learner, Chase left home at the age of 18 to study law in Annapolis, and was admitted to the bar at 20. 1 year later, in May 1762, he married Anne Baldwin. Together, they would have 3 sons and 4 daughters. Unfortunately, only 4 of their children survived to adulthood. In the same year, Samuel was expelled from Forensic Club, a debate society in Annapolis, for, quote, "extremely irregular and indecent behavior." Now, 2 years later, in 1764, his political career would begin at the age of 23, where he was elected to the Maryland General Assembly. He would serve here through various positions until 1784. In 1774, he was sent to the Continental Congress, and upon his arrival, he became displeased with those who sought a peaceful resolution with Britain. In his diary on September 15, 1775, John Adams noted that Chase was, quote, "violent and boisterous." Now, months later, in February of 1776, Adams would change his tone when he wrote to James Warren that Chase was, quote, "very active, eloquent, spirited, and capable." Samuel Chase traveled to Canada with Charles Carroll of Carrollton, John Carroll, and Benjamin Franklin in what turned out to be a failed attempt to win Canadians to the side of the colonists. And when they arrived back in Philadelphia, Chase learned that Maryland's delegates were under instruction to not vote for independence. He went back to the state with Charles Carroll, working day and night to gather support for independence. The pressure worked, and Samuel raced back to Philadelphia in time to vote for independence on July 2nd and on July 4th for the Declaration of Independence, of which he signed on August 2nd, 1776. His wife, Anne, passed away in 1776. In 78, he left Congress after Alexander Hamilton disclosed that Samuel was using insider information he gained while in Congress to corner the market on the sale of flour to the Army. Now, back in Maryland in 1783, Chase was set on assignment to England to recover stocks that belonged to the state, reportedly worth between $650,000 and $800,000. He didn't recover the money, but he did find love with one Hannah Kitty Giles. And on March 3rd, 1784, in Kentbury, England, they would marry. Together, they had 2 daughters. As an anti-federalist and having opposed the new Constitution, Chase declined to attend the Constitutional Convention in 1787. It was around this time that his political stardom in judicial circles would climb, and in 1788, he was appointed Chief Justice of the District Criminal Court in Baltimore, serving until 1796. It's unsure as to why he did a 180-degree turn from being an anti-federalist and joining the Federalist Party, but it did help his career when on January 26, 1796, President George Washington appointed Samuel Chase to be Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Now, the tides began to retreat when Adams became president, and took an even harder hit in 1803 when Thomas Jefferson took office. With the Democratic-Republican Party now in control of the U.S. House of Representatives, the impeachment of Chase began. In charge of the impeachment was Virginia Congressman John Randolph of Roanoke. The House of Representatives in 1804 served Samuel with 8 articles of impeachment, 1 charge for his handling of the trial of John Fries, 2 for his conduct in the political libel trial of James Callender, 1 for his conduct with the Newcastle grand jury, charging that he, quote, did descend from the dignity of a judge and stoop to the level of an informer by refusing to discharge the grand jury, although entreated by several of the said jury so to do, unquote. 3 charges for procedural errors made during adjudication of various matters, and 1 charge directed at his intemperate and, quote, intemperate and inflammatory, peculiarly, wow, that's a hard word, indecent and unbecoming, highly unwarrantable, highly indecent, unquote, remarks while charging or authorizing a Baltimore grand jury. The Jefferson Democratic-Republican-controlled U.S. Senate began the impeachment trial in early 1805 with Vice President Aaron Burr presiding and Randolph leading the prosecution. All counts involved his work as a trial judge in lower circuit courts. Now, in that era, the Supreme Court justices had an added duty of serving as individuals on circuit courts, a practice that was ended later in the late 19th century. At the heart of the allegations was a political bias which led Chase to treat defendants and their counsel in a blatantly unfair manner. Samuel argued that all of his actions were motivated by adherence to precedent, judicial duty to restrain advocates from improper statements of law, and considerations of judicial efficiency. On March 1, 1805, Samuel Chase was acquitted of all charges, even though a majority found him guilty. Lucky for Chase, a 2/3 plurality was required for conviction. One of the biggest things to come out of his impeachment is that it raised constitutional questions over the nature of the judiciary and was an end of a series of efforts to define the appropriate extent of judicial independence under the Constitution. It set the limits of impeachment power, fixed the concept that the judiciary was prohibited from engaging in partisan politics, and defined the role of a judge in a criminal jury trial, and clarified judicial independence. As Chase got into his older years, he was plagued with gout, and early in the day on June 19th, 1881, he had taken the bread and wine of the sacrament and said that he was at peace with all mankind. Later that day, at the age of 70, Samuel Chase passed away from a heart attack. And that is this week's Profiles in History. Okay, now I'm looking at the time and realizing we're done. That's it. That's all we've got for this week. I know some of you out there are going to be disappointed that we don't have a Who Said That. It's okay. To be quite honest, we can't highlight everybody. There were too many people, way too many people. One of these days we may have to have a special where we just highlight who said that people. If you subscribe through social media, whether it's Twitter's or Facebook or whatever it is, stay tuned, because we'll go ahead and we'll do that later on this year. We'll put together a special Who Said That show, and all of you guys can submit your nominees. But that is, unfortunately, all the time we have for this week, and God willing, the Stafford Voice will be back next week. You can follow me on the Twitters at Stafford Voice. Look me up on the Facebook. So all you got to do is just search for the Stafford Voice. Email any of your questions, comments, or concerns to thestaffordvoice@gmail.com. Also, if you haven't picked up on it, we're on the YouTubes. That's right, we've streamed this entire show. This is something new that we're doing each and every week. We're going to live stream not only the audio, in case you don't want to watch this ugly face. If you do, well, shame on you, because that's kind of creepy. Anyway, you can head over to the YouTubes, click subscribe. You'll be able to watch the show as soon as it goes live, or any other upcoming events that we do live. So be sure to follow over there on the YouTubes. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your time tonight. And until next week, thanks and God bless.